own communities. You know, while President Trump is constantly trying to divide us and move our country backwards, community leaders like all of you that are here today help keep us together and move us forward instead. You all remember when Republicans tried to take away families' health care with their harmful Trump Care bill. Well, we saw firsthand what it takes to fight back and win against this administration. It takes leaders like you who get their communities organized and energized and lift up those stories that drive home just what is at stake for families in our country. Well, we won that battle, but as all of you know, there's a lot more to fight. Republicans are still pushing for other catastrophic steps like their partisan lawsuit, which will strike down protections for pre-existing. See, Amy takes care of me too.
Yeah.
It works both ways.
Just put this on, see if that works. And we'll turn.
I don't know. Gosh, you were really talented, Amy. I'm just
If it's
impressed.
working. Okay.
Okay. You know, after years of effort and progress, the uninsured rate is now once again creeping back up. Why? Because of Republicans' relentless attacks. And you know that Latinos make up a disproportionate share of adults who do not have health insurance. That is why we as Democrats are pushing for steps to repair the damage Republicans have done, like restoring funding to the Navigator program, which is so important to Latino families who are looking to find quality, affordable health care that's right for them. And of course, it is not just health care we're fighting for. At almost every turn, Republicans are pushing to make things harder for our families. Do you know that since 1990, college attainment among Latino families has nearly doubled? But instead of building on that progress and opening the doors of opportunity wide, Secretary DeVos seems more focused on slamming the door shut with budgets and regulations that would make very deep cuts to public education. It would eliminate debt forgiveness for public servants and let colleges off the hook for poor quality programs and loosen accountability for for-profit colleges, which, by the way, enroll a disproportionate number of Latino students. And Republicans have been blocking Democrats' efforts to pass the Future Act, which would provide critical funding to support STEM programs and student services at our nation's Hispanic-serving institutions, HBCUs, and other minority-serving institutions to help create a diverse workforce. And Senator Jones, who's here today, is leading that fight back, and we owe him a great debt, and we're fighting every day with him to get that restored. And of course, Republicans are blocking our efforts to raise the minimum wage, close the pay gap, which is even larger among Latina women who are paid just 54 cents for every dollar their white male counterparts make, 54 cents. And that amounts to over $1 million in wages lost to the pay gap over a lifetime. But instead of taking steps to help people get the wages they deserve, the Trump administration has taken steps to sweep pay discrimination under the rug and weaken overtime protections for our workers. We need to fight back against this president's anti-worker agenda to make sure people can get a good job in a safe workplace at fair wages that allow them to support their families and plan for their futures. And we need to make sure we protect every worker's right to unionize and advocate for better working conditions. And you know what? The key to fighting for our communities, the key to make sure that everyone can get a quality, affordable health care, the key to making sure we are investing in every community and every student's future, the key to making sure every worker is treated fairly and is able to exercise their rights is to have strong community leaders like all of you helping to organize and engage people and lift up their stories. So that is why I want to thank all of you for being here and working with us as we move our country to a better place for all of our families. So thank you. And now, it's my honor to turn this mic over to someone who is a tireless champion for Latino communities in his state and across the nation. He is a leading voice on our immigration. When he speaks up in our caucus, we all listen on this issue. He's critical to all of us, and I want to thank him for his deep-seated heart that works every day to make sure every family, every person, every young person in this country has the right to the great America we all believe in. Senator Dick Durbin.
We're passing the microphone here. Thanks, Patty Murray. Amy Klobuchar, thank you for your leadership in bringing us together today. It's good that you're off that trail and back here with us. We're glad to have you home. Just for today. She may be going to Iowa, who knows? November. Politicians talk about November. And most of us think of November in terms of 2020, the big fight, the big election. But I want to really ask you to focus for a minute on another November. This November just a few days away. And I want you to focus on one day, November 12th. If you walked out that door and made a quick left and walked 2 blocks, just 2 blocks from where we're sitting at this moment, you would be on the steps of the United States Supreme Court. On November the 12th, in that building, 9 men and women on the Supreme Court will decide the fate of 790,000 who have been protected by DACA. I think it's an important day. For them, it's everything. It is a question as to whether they can continue to stay in the United States without fear of deportation and whether they can legally work in this country. I know that they've been counting days for a long time. I try to imagine, just for a moment, what it must be like not to know what's going to happen a few months from now in terms of your future, whether that knock on the door is going to come and you're going to see your life turned upside down. It was 18 years ago that I introduced the DREAM Act. I actually introduced it for a Korean girl in Chicago who was facing deportation. I thought it was just unfair. She'd been brought here at the age of 2. She was raised in a very poor family, but she did well, and she was a musical prodigy. She played the piano, was accepted at Manhattan Conservatory of Music in New York. She wasn't going to get any financial aid from our government because she was undocumented. And it was because of Teresa Lee that I introduced the DREAM Act 18 years ago. I'd have to say at that moment in history, if you would have asked most people who were the Dreamers, they would have said, isn't that a British rock group? Well, when you say the Dreamers today, people think of something much different. They think of people like Teresa and hundreds of thousands just like her, who grew up in families being warned at a certain age to be careful. Be careful what you say, be careful where you go, be careful what you do, be careful when you're in the car, because if you are arrested, we all could be forced to leave, or our family could be torn apart. You know, it was tough enough being a teenager. I can remember those years, I bet you can too. I cannot imagine being a teenager with that fear hanging over you every single day. We couldn't pass the DREAM Act and make it the law, but I decided to reach out to a former senator from Illinois who was a co-sponsor of the DREAM Act by the name of Barack Obama. I sent him a letter. It was co-signed by a Republican senator, Richard Lugar of Indiana. The two of us asked on a bipartisan basis, Mr. President, can you do something? Can you create by executive order something to protect these dreamers? And he did. He created DACA. And he basically said, if you fit the category and definition of a dreamer, come forward. Register with your government. Pay a substantial filing fee. Go through a criminal background check, and if you are approved, we will give you 2 years of protection. Renewable, 2 years of protection. As I mentioned earlier, 790,000 came forward. You know these people. Are there any DACA recipients in our room? Bless you. And I know we talked earlier. Thank you. Thank you all. How many people in this room know someone who's protected by DACA? And you know what their lives are like now, don't you? Waiting for their renewal date, hoping beyond hope that something good will happen in that Supreme Court. I've told their stories on the floor of the Senate 120 times, big color photographs. Once they decided to stop whispering and start speaking up, I joined them and I told their stories, 120 amazing stories. I wanted the people in the galleries and those who watched on television to know who these young people are, what extraordinary people. You know what's amazing to me? I just was sure that by the time we'd reached this moment in history, one of these young people would have screwed up royally. And they would have come to Durban and say, see what your DACA recipient ended up doing? It never happened. It's never happened. And I hope it never will. But it says something about you and many just like you. All the challenges that you've faced in your life and growing up and being part of America and knowing in the back of your mind that there are politicians who want to end it. Well, November the 12th, it's Tuesday. Remember it, because for the 790,000 DACA recipients and for their families, it's going to be a critical day. And remember something else. Even if we are successful, and I pray we are, in making sure that the protection of DACA remains, those DACA recipients will not be able to speak up in our democratic process the following November in 2020. They won't be able to vote, which is a shame. I want them to be citizens as well as their families, to be part of our future. But it means really the rest of us have a responsibility, do we not? To be their voice, to speak up for them and their families, and the 11 million who are here in this country, who are such a critical part of who we are and who we will be. It breaks my heart to hear the hateful things that come out of the mouth of this president and the people who are around him. Murderers, rapists, fear, hate, drugs, caravans. We've heard it all. But I believe this country is a better country than what President Trump imagines. I believe at our heart we understand that our diversity is our strength. I understand it. My mother was an immigrant to this country, and her son got a full-time government job. And many like her prayed that education and the opportunity of freedom in this country would make a difference in the lives of their children. It did in my family. That's my story. That's America's story. We've got to tell that story and be an important part of the 2020 November election to make sure that this growing segment of the American population, which will decide the election, gets registered and votes. It's time for us to make sure this Latino Summit is not just a celebration of what we've had in the past, but a determination of where we will be in the future. 790,000 DACA recipients are counting on us, as their families are. We're going to get that done. Thank you all very much. Hey, Bob.
Well, thank you, Senator Durbin. We've also been joined by Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota. Thank you, Tina, for joining us. That makes 16 members of the Senate have so far been here. That's 40% of the Senate Democratic Caucus. That's pretty good. So it's now my pleasure to introduce you to the distinguished guests of our first fireside chat, someone whose career has been a source of awe and inspiration to millions of people across America and around the world, Eva Longoria Baston. Eva is many things to many people. She's a Golden Globe nominated and Screen Actor Guild award-winning actress. She's an accomplished producer and director. She's an entrepreneur and global brand ambassador for L'Oréal Paris and co-founder of one of the most influential groups of our time, Time's Up. Throughout her career, Eva has chosen to use her success and her fame as a platform to empower others. She created the Eva Longoria Foundation in 2012 to help Latinas build better futures for themselves through education and entrepreneurship. Eva has spoken about the foundation's work before the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, International Labor Organization, the Clinton Global Initiative, the National Council La Raza, among many others. All told, the Eva Longoria Foundation has directly impacted more than 23,000 lives in the United States and Mexico. Eva is also co-founder of Eva's Heroes, which enriches the lives of those with special needs. Her entrepreneurial activities include serving as a global brand ambassador for L'Oréal Paris. CEO of Unbelievable Entertainments, Fragrances Eva, and Evermore, authoring a New York Times best-selling cookbook, Eva's Kitchen, and debuting home collection lines with JCPenney. She received her master's degree in Chicano Studies from California State University, Northridge, where her thesis focused on Latinas in the STEM field. Eva's leadership was instrumental during the 2012 election when she teamed up with Henry Munoz III to establish the Futuro Fund and the Latino Victory Project, and she continues to work to empower and engage Hispanic voters in our democracy. We saw her all across the country in trying to get our community to turn out and to elect more Latinos at all different levels of government. Latinas are the future of this country, and with leaders like Eva Longoria Baston at the helm, I'm confident that our future is bright. Please join me in welcoming Eva Longoria Baston.
Hi.
You're in the middle. Excited to have you with us, Eva, and we want to thank you for coming, and we mostly want to hear from you.
Nobody wants to hear from me. I don't think our mics are working though.
Yeah.
Switch them on. Hello. Oh, we have.
Testing. We'll go down as the funniest. I don't think the Russians are involved, but we're having a lot of
Hello, hello.
technological issues. Is it on? There we go.
Yeah. Oh, buenos dias.
Well, we want to thank you for being here, and you've become such a powerful voice for all of us, actually. And why don't you talk a little bit about why that is, how you went beyond your comfort zone of your work, and tell us what you've been doing.
Oh my God, that's a big question. First of all, I'm so honored to be here with the first Latina ever nominated to the Senate. This is like,
And you helped me get here. Thank you. Because of her.
I can't believe it was, took so long, especially in a state like Nevada. I am always excited to preach to the choir, because I think we need a few amens sometimes. But yeah, I'm in Hollywood doing my thing, and sometimes I think people in the media, they feel like their jobs have nothing to do with what's happening in policy making and in our country, and it's absolutely correlated and related. And so for me, I feel like I'm trying to be an internal activist with images and portrayals of Latinos in the media. And that's really my purpose and my goal with my production company as a director, because I think, there was a report that just came out from the Annenberg study that was really disturbing, and it was more than underrepresentation of Latinos in the media. It was about erasure. We are being erased when we do not show up in media. And that's in every form: TV, film, news, radio, online, print, anything. We're just severely underrepresented. We don't have a seat at that table. And so I think when you see Latino children in cages, you get numb to that fact, because what you've seen on screen shows a dangerous person. We're depicted in very narrow ways on screen. And so it's my job as a content creator to create that content that best reflects our community, which is complex and diverse and intelligent and hardworking and moral, and we're so many other things. And so that's really what I'm doing. Tom is here from Maldives. Have you spoken yet? You will speak,
No,
yes.
he's coming up.
Oh my gosh, probably one of my greatest mentors in this room is Tom Sines from Maldives.
Very good.
Every time I have a question about something legally, I call Tom.
Uh-oh, I think we need to call Tom.
We need to call Tom.
So let me ask you this, because you just talked about mentors.
Yeah.
And you talked about
the work that you're doing, and thank you so much. But we also know it's not just being in the front of the camera or being elected, it's all the people that help us get here, right? Behind the scenes, knocking down those barriers. Because I know when I got here and I walked through the halls of Congress, not a lot of people that looked similar, right? Not a lot of diversity. And so the fight was how do we make more of that happen, and pulling all of the staffers together and say, what are the barriers? How do we knock down those barriers? And I know that's the work that you've done as well. It's not just about who's in front of the camera, but also behind. And all of the work that you've done with your foundation. So can you talk a little bit about mentorships and tearing down those barriers, and how we get people more of that, open that door a little bit more so more people come through it, and the work that you're doing around that space?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we know the barriers. There's nothing new that we don't know, specifically for women. And then the intersectionality of gender and race, and then gender and race and socioeconomic status. So, you know, you have to understand, it's more than we need to see the table. We need to create our own table. And, you know, I was telling somebody in Hollywood, there's these gatekeepers of content, and it's executives and it's presidents and people in power that green light things or say, yeah, let's produce that. And those rooms never look like the country or the world, right? They're white and they're male. And so I was on a panel, and I was saying, you know, we need to change those gatekeepers. We need to build a pipeline of talent. We need to nurture that talent of future executives, future decision makers, so that when I go in a room and pitch La Llorona, somebody knows what I'm talking about, you know? Or, you know, a wonderful historic story about Gus Garcia. And so I think that I said that on a panel, and somebody came up to me after the panel, and they said, you know, I said we need to educate the gatekeepers, and that person said we need to change the gatekeepers, right? And so it's more about educating people about who we are and our contributions, and that is through mentorship, and that is by saying yes. So if you are in a position of power, if anybody has as the slightest leadership position, it is your job and responsibility to nurture and build that pipeline of talent and build that confidence and self-esteem in not only our youth, in anybody. You know, sometimes the myth is like, oh, we're going to leave it to the future generation. No, we're here. You know, I'm almost 45 and starting on a new career of directing, and you know, so time's not up for us either. I think it's you know, it's on us to create that change now, and I think we get overwhelmed by the scope of our problems. Like, what could I possibly do about immigration reform? What could I possibly do about women's rights? And a lot. There's a lot you can do. The most powerful position in democracy is the citizen. And so I think we have to educate our communities on how to utilize that power. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So I was just thinking, as I heard you talk about Hollywood, about what it's like in politics sometimes for women.
Yeah.
The stat actually is that in the history of the Senate, the whole U.S. Senate, there's been like 2,000 men and just over 50 women. And Trevor Noah said if a nightclub had a ratio that bad, they'd shut it down. So, no, and I think that when you think of Latinos, you think about this population that's growing and growing and becoming more and more powerful. Yet, as you said, in the pinnacles of power, oftentimes they're not represented. And so that's what you've been working to change. But you've had something else change in your life, and that's that you had a baby.
I did. I had a baby.
And so to talk a little bit about that, yes, this is worth a hand.
Hey, every mother in this room deserves applause.
And how that has changed your perspective on this and jobs and trying to get into the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, you know, having a child changes everything, and I think what surprised me the most was my philanthropy and activism got more intense. Like all of a sudden I got anxiety about, oh my God, we have to leave the world a better place because he's going to be in it now. And it's not like I wasn't doing anything before, but there's definitely fear in what the world is going to be like when he grows up in it. And, you know, I remember when I was in 3rd grade, my mom had me tested for the gifted and talented school. And to my surprise, I got in. And, And that meant I had to be bussed out of my neighborhood into this rich white neighborhood across town. And my mom, every morning, she'd make me a bean taco. That was breakfast. And I remember getting on the bus with my bean taco and seeing a sea of blonde and a sea of Pop-Tarts. Like, everybody had a Pop-Tart. I had never seen a Pop-Tart. I was like, wow, what is that? And they were looking at me going, what's that? Right? And I was like, everybody eats bean tacos. Doesn't everybody eat bean tacos for breakfast? Everybody in my neighborhood ate bean tacos. And I remember somebody on the bus whispering, she's Mexican. And I didn't know what that meant because I'm 9th generation American. Yeah. And everybody around me was Mexican, so we didn't call each other Mexican. You know, like it just was. But I didn't know what it meant, but I know it was negative, right? Out of these kids' voices. And so when I think about, that was a long time ago, that today there's still that negative connotation to it. And even worse, it's synonymous with so many other things because of an unconscious bias that partly we're responsible for in the media. I think about my son and how he's gonna grow up, and I don't want him to be on a bus where somebody whispers, you're Mexican. Yeah. Like, I don't want that world for him. I want him to be proud of his culture. I want him to speak Spanish. I want him to eat bean tacos. And so, it's changed everything. And I remember thinking, when I found out I was having a boy, I was like, oh, I really wanted a feminist woman. And somebody told me, we need way more great men than more amazing. Women are amazing anyway, but we need men as our allies, right, to help us with that journey. And so, it's everything. The lens in which I see life is as a mom now, and so it's changed everything.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you were born and raised in Texas.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a Texican.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tejano.
Yeah.
Right? And so you talk about that you were there when the border changed, right? So your people were there longer when the border kind of moved.
Yeah, we didn't cross the border crossed us.
That's right,
Yeah.
And that's powerful because it is. Because I think people don't realize the contributions, right? That and
The
how
history.
long and the history.
Yeah.
And by the way, she has a master's degree in studying
Chicanos.
history, and
Yeah.
I think it's powerful because that to me is really. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about that, because
Yeah.
I think we all appreciate our history, but not everybody understands it, and that shows the contributions and how long that we've been there.
Even as a Mexican American, I didn't understand my history from a Mexican point of view. Yeah. And that's why I went back to get my master's, was because this was a while ago, and I said, I want to understand immigration. It was such a hot topic, and the history of immigration. And so I took one class, and I took two classes, and I took like Chicano 101, and that was a preview of history from pre-Columbian, from before the Aztecs, I mean, Toltecs and Olmecs, all the way to NAFTA, all the way to present time, and it was like a crash course in a different perspective, right? It was revisionist history because it was like, oh, that's what really happened. Yeah. So if you think about Texas in particular and what happened with the settling of Texas when it was Mexico, and how those immigrants were welcomed to settle Texas, well, Mexico, North Mexico. That's not happening today. Right. Right? So what if it was the other way around? So a lot of people don't understand the history of our country and, how the entire Southwest, from California to Texas, was, really embedded in Hispanic culture in the most beautiful way. Yeah. And so, my family came here in 1603. So we're 13th generation in the New World. But my family, to this day, we have the same land in Texas from 1603. And we were under 5 different flags without ever moving. Yeah, so it was like New Spain, Mexico, France for a minute, Republic of Texas, and then the United States. And so that's rich history, and that's not just my story. That's a lot of our stories. And so when people say, go home, I'm like, I am home. I'm really home.
I've lived here longer than you.
I'm more, American than our president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of that,
Yeah.
As so many of us in this room are involved in policy at the local, state, federal level, and we struggle with how to change the narrative, really, that this president has set, because this president wants to make immigration all about security issues, and really go after people, and that's what he does. He does it every day in some new way. And to me, and I obsess with this, one of our focuses should be on making the economic case for immigrants. How Latino community, really all our immigrants communities, 70 of our Fortune 500 companies are headed up by people who are born in other countries. 25% of our US Nobel laureates were born in other countries. And making that case for this incredible business force and the contributions to the economy, ideas on that, and how we change the narrative, especially as we go into this election, not only on the federal level, but on the state and local as well.
Especially on the state and local level. So many thoughts on that. I do think we as Hispanics have been focused on the moral imperative. This is inhumane, what is happening on the border. How we are treating other human beings is just appalling. And that argument is not working. And so we need the economic imperative argument, right? We cannot deny, and we have to educate people, we cannot deny that we have major industries dependent upon immigrant labor, more than agriculture. It's not just agriculture. And so there's a wonderful book called They Take Our Jobs by Aviva Chomsky, and it debunks the 20 myths of immigration. They don't pay taxes. She goes, actually they do, and here's how. They use social services. Actually they don't, and here's why. She just breaks it down in a way where when we live in a factless world, right? Facts are going unchecked. You have to be armed with ammunition, and that ammunition is still knowledge. It is still truth. And I really believe that. And I think the truth of the matter is, this country does not work without the engine of the Latino community and the engine of immigrant labor. And so how do we make that statement loud? How do we become the loudest voice in the room, right? And so that's I think, you're absolutely right in that. And I think we have to engage people in the state and local levels to create that change, because that's where so many of these laws are being made. People show up every presidential election and think they're participating in and doing their civil duty, but it's not. You really have to pay attention to what's happening in your cities and your states. I remember Michelle Obama being on a panel one time, and somebody stood up and was yelling at her for her student loans, and she goes, and Michelle gracefully said, that's your governor. He did that tax cut. He did that thing. He did that thing. Did you vote for that governor? And stumped the student, because people don't understand how government works sometimes. And a lot of times it's your local school board that was responsible for this horrible change in your schooling, or your reproductive rights as women are being taken away at the state level. And so there's so many things we have to fight, and we have to change those arguments.
Yeah, and I think it's great. So, and you've always been in that fight to make change. If you don't know, she has been incredible. I'm from Nevada, and I am here partly because of the work that you have done. And in 2016, when I was elected, the Latino Victory Project and Foundation came out and supported so many of us. And I think it is important. Because at that time, as you well know, as we were going around the state of Nevada, we were also dealing with a president who was calling Mexicans rapists, drug dealers, right, killers, and they can't be here. And he's talking about our families. And it was so emotional in Nevada, as we all know, a third of the population are Latinos, and a majority are from Mexico, right? And so it was just this emotion on top of everything else, right? Now, fast forward, October 1, we have a horrific massacre and shooting at a concert in Las Vegas. Fast forward again, El Paso.
Yeah.
And we see the hate crime that I think is just horrific that happened there. And do you mind talking a little, because you did a powerful piece. You decided to sit down and pen a piece about that. And it got picked up by not only the New York Times, but so many national media and so many people signed on to that. So you talk just a little bit about kind of what you were feeling at the time and why you felt it was important to speak out.
Yeah, we did a letter called Querida Familia, which was after the El Paso shooting, which really hit home for me as a Texan. And knowing I drop my mom off at Walmart all the time.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that this happened in this community was devastating to my heart. But and then the ICE raids happened in Mississippi, like back to back. And so we just wanted our Latino community to know you're not alone. And that was the point, is you're not alone. Because sometimes they don't know that we're here. You're here fighting, and we're here fighting for them every day. And so they can feel hopeless. And for me, it was important to write a love letter to every single immigrant who was scared and didn't want to take their kids to school in fear that they would be picked up, and won't report a crime because, in fear that they will be deported. And that's the opposite of what we wanted them to feel. So we wrote this Querida Familia letter, and the response was amazing. I mean, we had over 250 artists, activists, entertainers, media, journalists, everybody signed on to say, we are with you. And sometimes you need to hear that to get, your strength back to survive. But we don't want our community just to survive. We want our community to thrive. And so that's what that letter was about after that time.
And thank you for doing that. It was powerful.
Yeah, it was
very powerful.
I didn't realize the impact it was going to have. We were all just hurting as a whole. And so to say, to darle un abrazo, to just hold our community tight, did wonders. There's so much hate, like you're talking about the vitriol happening. There's so much hate in the world, and hate is such an active emotion that we forget love is equal to hate. So if we love just as much, if we love just as strongly, and if we believe in that love for our community as strong as people hate our community, we can overcome a lot. And that's, I know that's an abstract idea, but we have to remember, we have to stay strong and focused on the positive.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And let people know they belong here.
Belong here.
Well, I think we are coming to a close here, but you should know there are a number of other senators that have arrived. Senator Udall and Senator Merkley here, right in the front. We don't always have this many senators here for a panel like this. I don't know why that happened, but we appear to have added a little glamour to Washington, D.C. But if you just want to say a few words in closing, Eva, because both Catherine and I just have so enjoyed this time with you, and you're an incredible person.
No, thank you. I am one person. I think the myth is you have to be famous or you have to be a politician to make a difference, and that's not true. I think every single person in this room is going to do something really great after this. I believe in you. I give you permission. Sometimes we just want permission to be great. You got it? And I think my biggest message is don't let the media dictate the divides that we have in this country. You should really focus on what we all agree on, and that's so many things, especially in a policy way. We all agree the Violence Against Women Act needs to get passed. Right? We all agree. We all agree that the Equal Pay Act, it's got to get passed. Like, we got to get it done. We all agree on sensible gun control, right? Common sense gun laws. The majority of America really wants to protect dreamers. The majority of America believe in contraception and women's reproductive rights. So focus on the things that we all agree on instead of the things that we don't, and then hold your senators accountable in a loud way. We have seen civil disobedience have positive impact, and so I think I encourage it. I encourage that debate, that challenge, that protest, because that's the only way your politicians will be held accountable to listen to the people of America, because that's who they're here to represent. So that's what I would say.
Very good. Well, thank you
you.
so much, Eva. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. Who's next? Hi.
Okay. Very good. I think we're going to get our panel up here now.
Oh, another panel. This is
Yeah.
exciting.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all.
Good. I'm going to keep Okay. Let me take a. And Udall speaking, oh, yeah, good. And that's, yeah.
Okay. Testing, yeah.
Current life right now, I'm just like, they're just kind of up there. The microphone's not working. See you.
Hello, everybody. We need everybody to be seated. We're about ready to start our next panel here. So, as Ava's going out the door, let's give her a real round of applause for that great fireside chat that Amy and Catherine were a part of. Hello, I'm Senator Tom
Okay,
Udall.
everyone, could you sit down?
Yeah, please, everyone sit
Yeah,
down.
the pictures, I know you're all taking pictures of Tom.
Yeah, no, they're not taking pictures of me here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're so excited Senator Udall's
Yeah.
with us. Thank you.
Okay, Amy, we're excited you and Jeff Merkley are here. You guys are tops. Okay, I'm Senator Tom Udall from New Mexico. It's great to be here, and I want to thank the Democratic Steering Committee for organizing today's important summit. Debbie Stabenow and the whole committee has been great on that. You know, the way I look at this, and especially hearing that fireside chat with Ava, our nation is at a crossroads. We have two starkly different paths before us. There is the president's path of division, racism, and hatred. From the day he announced he was running for president, President Trump has targeted Latinos and immigrants. New Mexico, my home state, is a proud majority-minority state. Our Hispanic communities are fundamental to our identity, but they are in the bullseye of this administration's cruelest policies. New Mexico's Hispanic communities are targeted by this president, and this is what he's doing, and you're seeing this every day: demonizing immigrants and flouting our asylum process, assaulting our environment, trying to take away health care, stacking the deck for the wealthy few instead of building an economy that works for everyone, attacking voter rights, and on and on. But we in New Mexico choose a different path. We know that our multiculturalism does not divide us, it defines us. It is our strength. It is the path all of us today choose. I'm honored to introduce these leaders who are working for inclusivity, diversity, and unity. And so let me introduce your panelists today. Maria Teresa Kumar, President and CEO of Voto Latino. There is nothing more important than getting out the vote in our elections. Maria and Voto Latino do that, tackle the most pressing issues before Latinos and working to empower Latinos across the nation. Thomas A. Saenz, President and General Counsel of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and Chair of the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda. For decades, MALDEF has been at the forefront of civil rights, education, immigration, voting rights, and so many other issues. Jose Calderon, President of the Hispanic Federation. Jose and the Hispanic Federation are a model for Latino social, political, and economic empowerment. And Astrid Silva, Executive Director of Dream Big Nevada. Astrid and Dream Big Nevada provide direct services to the state's immigrant families and empower them to advocate for themselves. Astrid and her own courageous story as a dreamer and activist for others. This should be an informative and invigorating panel. Please give this panel a very, very warm welcome.
Well, thank you. And we're not going to have presentations here. We're just going to go right away to questions. And I want to thank the panelists. Less than 3 weeks from now, right across the street, the Supreme Court will hear the DACA cases that could decide the fate of about 800,000 dreamers. The past years have brought unspeakable pain and fear and uncertainty. I think you know where we are all on this, on the Democratic caucus, and we've been so disappointed by the administration and by our Republican colleagues who have not been able to pass even a simple law so that the dreamers can stay. Astrid, as a dreamer and a leading advocate, you understand this better than anyone. Can you talk about all that is at stake and what each of us should be doing? And of course, we'll allow others to weigh in on this issue. It's just so timely because it's right before us, literally across the street.
Thank you, Senator. And for me, Dream Big Nevada, we just had a DACA renewal clinic this weekend with Forward Informed Immigrant because I renewed my DACA because I don't know what's going to happen. This is something that keeps me up at night, keeps my parents up at night, keeps our community up at night. And as Senator Klobuchar said, it's happening across the street here. The majority of my community is never going to see the Supreme Court. They're never going to walk the halls of the Capitol. And yet our lives are being decided every single day here. And it's you know, I always like to talk about, for me, what DACA did. DACA changed my life. It made me feel that I couldn't, I could finally fulfill the things that I had been wanting to do. But now I'm thinking about what's going to happen. Are there going to be more deportations? And things that everybody can do are those deportations. The funding for them right now is happening. The funding for our communities to continue to be terrorized is happening. Every single day, we have families coming in that are afraid of a deportation order from 30 years ago, that are afraid of something that happened 25 years ago. For me, my family, my parents would be able to adjust if it wasn't for the 3 to 10 year bar. These are the things that every single day are happening in our community. And for me, I think I'm in a place of privilege where I get to tell all of you this. But the majority of my family, my friends, our community will never get to talk about it. And so it's all of our responsibility to talk about it. And that's something that each of us, one of us can do. And to remind people right now, renew your DACA. Get those documentations in. If you don't need to renew your DACA, donate for somebody to renew their DACA. If you can't donate, share a flyer. Let people know that this is important and this is happening right now, because unfortunately, a lot of our community is working their 9 to 5, and then their 7 to midnight, and then their next job, and so they don't have the opportunity to be looking into all these things that we're doing.
Maybe, Thomas, do you want to add just your perspective, the legal perspective of what's happening, what could happen with this case, the consequences?
Well, I think it's critically important to not just those who are recipients of DACA, but to the future of our country, what the Supreme Court decides. And I just want to remind us of the important legal issues at stake and how monstrously hypocritical the Trump administration has been. We recall that the reason Jeff Sessions, who announced the end of DACA, gave was that it was outside of President Obama's executive authority. He couldn't do it. He didn't have the power. Now, this is an administration where he tweets daily that he has all of the powers and more than he actually has. This is a man who has asserted that there's an emergency that allows him to take the appropriations decided by this Congress and move money from defense and other important services to an unnecessary wall. That's what's being argued seriously to the Supreme Court, that President Obama didn't have the power, a power, by the way, exercised by all of his predecessors from both parties, but didn't have the power to implement DACA. At the same time, the administration making the argument is diverting millions and millions of dollars to an unnecessary wall, number one. And the last point I want to make is, Senator Klobuchar, you mentioned the economic case. I want someone to find the economist who would say that in a full employment economy, it makes sense at that point to yank over 1 million workers out of the workforce. Because that's the effect of ending DACA and TPS, is 1 million workers, some of the most ingenious, creative, and experienced workers in the workforce, yanking them out of the workforce in the middle of a full employment economy. Just to be more specific, thousands of teachers filling gaps, teaching communities that otherwise there wouldn't be someone in front of a classroom who knows the experience of the kids they're talking to. Thousands of teachers yanked out of the workforce. That's what we're facing, beginning with that oral argument in the middle of next month.
Any predictions on what will happen?
I predict that it will be unpredictable from November 12th. I'm serious. I'm serious. We're going to hear every report saying, oh, the conservatives are going to rule against this program. They said the same thing about the citizenship question on the census. And in the end, Chief Justice Roberts saw the institutional, national importance of the issue and switched sides. That's what happened. So don't listen to all the pundits who are going to say after November 12th, we're going to lose this. We got to keep the pressure up, keep making the arguments in the newspapers and media, online and otherwise, that the justices and their clerks read, so that Chief Justice Roberts in particular will appreciate the incredible importance to the nation of what they're deciding.
Well, regardless of what happens with the Supreme Court, it's way past time for Congress to act to protect our dreamers. The episode that occurred on a Tuesday at the White House, the president invited in the House and the Senate and Democrats and Republicans, and brought in the press and said, bring me a bipartisan dreamer bill. I will take the heat, I will sign it. And we all went, yes. And 2 days later, a delegation of Democrats and Republicans went up to the White House with a bipartisan Dreamer bill, and the president threw a temper tantrum. He took no heat. It just took 2 days of a criticism from the far right to abandon any chance of getting that bill done. And so we need a House and a Senate and an occupant of the Oval Office that are prepared to fight for the fundamental freedoms in America, and that includes full legal opportunity and pathway forward for our dreamers in the United States of America. So I want to shift a little bit to the situation with the President's zero tolerance strategy announced in May of 2018, and that was code for child separation. And I said to my staff team, surely here in the United States of America, no administration, not even this administration, would consider ripping children out of their parents' arms as a strategy of deterrence to send a message. And one of my team members said, well, one way to find out is to go to the border. And that following Sunday, I flew down and I became the first member of Congress to see the 30 by 30 foot chain link cages, little boys in one, little girls in another. Went up to Brownsville and tried to get into a Walmart that I'd been told had hundreds. In my mind, the president has extinguished Lady Liberty's torch. And the scar is deep. The impact on thousands and thousands of children, and that the United States would do this, our government, with our tax money, our electeds, our territory. So the question I have to the panel is, how deep is this scar? Can we recover, and what are the political reverberations that will stem from the way, the obscene, dark, and evil fashion in which we've been treating migrants on the border? And would you like to begin, Maria?
First of all, I want to thank Senator Merkel, and I want to thank Senator Klobuchar for having this conversation so early on, right before the elections, because I think that is what we know is going to be able to be the sea of change. And the fact that you were the first senator to stand up and go and witness also is testament. I have to share with you, Senator, shortly after you went, I went down and was doing coverage, and it was heartbreaking because you would see vans going into the Ursula Processing Center full of people, and then the vans would leave through an hour. I was there for about 12 hours, and you just see full of people. They would come back, and the vans would leave empty to go pick up more people. It was absolutely devastating, and the fact that we didn't have more people outraged was at first heartbreaking, but then one of the things that we found out right after the 2018 election was one of the reasons we were able to bring back the House was because we were able to appeal to the hearts of suburban white women who are saying this is not okay. And it's understanding that there are unities and threads that bind us together as Americans, regardless of the color of our skin, that gives me hope, it gives me light, but also recognizing that the work is hard and long. This administration, what they are doing, it's not just, they start with the most vulnerable. They're starting with children who have no voice or no vote, but they're not ending there. The citizenship question that specifically was aimed to intimidate Latinos was done by a GOP strategist that literally said, we want the citizenship question to carve out white, Republican, non-Hispanic districts. It can't get any clearer. When you have someone drive over 10 hours to go and shoot up one of the safest cities in our country that is 85% Latino and rips from his manifesto the president's tweets about a Mexican invasion and connects it to the Hispanic voting bloc, we don't need any clear marching orders, gente. We know what to do. And there is incredible intimidation and fear in the Latino community, but at the same time, there's incredible resilience because, Senator Merkel, we come from families that all we know what to do is fight. That is our lucha, and they brought the lucha to our doorstep. And what we saw in the midterm election was that Latinos came out and we voted almost to our presidential levels. Our challenge is closing the voter registration gap. We have 15 million Latinos who are unregistered. 15 million. 10 million of them are young people. 25% of those young people live in Texas. Voto Latino last year directly registered 15% of all new Texans, and we were damn proud because 77% out cast a ballot. That is our charge. It is clear.
That's working. Thank you, Senator Merkley. Thank you so much. So I flew into D.C. today, and on the cover of, I went into a concession stand, and on the cover of The Economist, I'm not sure if you've seen it, it says, "Who can trust Donald Trump's America?" We knew the answer to that 4 years ago. We knew the Latinos were not going to be able to trust Donald Trump. And in fact, with all the horrors that this administration has brought upon our community, certainly our nation, our democracy, nothing quite tugs at the heart or makes us horrified more than the child separation policies that we've seen this administration. It has been government-sanctioned torture of children. That is essentially what we have seen under this administration. It is the torture of children to advance a xenophobic agenda of this administration. And that is intolerable, it's insufferable, and we have to reject it in every single way possible. You have seen people stand up to say, this is not who we are. And it's not who we are because it's not only about Latinos, right? Because family is at the very heart of what defines a civilization. It is at the very heart of what defines a nation of people. And the tearing of that family and the separation of families, tearing children from their mothers, parents from their children, strikes at the very heart of the foundation of this country and any country in the world. And so, Senator Merkley, you talk about repercussions. We think about the impact of this beyond our shores. You think about the impact it has on Latinos, right? Latinos across the Americas, right? When we think about all the way from here, all the way to Argentina, the Caribbean, and everything in between. And we say, we used to look up to America. We used to think of America as a place where you could go and find freedom, as a place that was really a shining star, a North Star, in terms of rights, in terms of human rights, in terms of the understanding of what family is ultimately about, and the plight of immigrants, and why people have to migrate from one place to another. And he has betrayed not only us as Americans, but he's betrayed the entire Americas, and he's betrayed the entire world through that action of zero-tolerance policy. And we need to be mindful that this is still happening today. So what you witnessed, Senator Merkley, and what we all witnessed over the past couple of years, certainly last year in particular, is still happening today. It's still happening today, and we need to be outraged the same way we were outraged, again, a year ago. We need to continue to have that level of outrage to say, not in our name, not in America, not in this country will we allow you to do this. Again, the question of, who can trust Donald Trump's America? No one can. No American can say that they can trust Donald Trump's America when you're caging children.
Thomas.
We have so much work ahead of us, even when we get Donald Trump out of the White House, because of the long-term damage that has been done to this country. Think for a moment about the trauma involved in separating a child of young age from his or her parents. Think of the trauma and the long-term effects of that trauma for a child, even a teenager, who is caged for no reason over months and months. We are going to have to deal legislatively through social programs with the post-traumatic stress disorder that is going to be endemic because of what this administration has done to so many thousands of people. I say it, we have to be prepared to dig deep in undoing the damage of this administration. We can't take what I have called the Cheetos approach, which is, you look for the orange dust from the fingers on the policies and you just get rid of those policies. It's not enough. The deep damage is long-term when we have to address it, to say nothing of the serious harm to our nation's soul that my colleagues have talked about.
Well said. Now, I was just listening as Maria Teresa was talking about the voting change. And, we're looking at, as she said, this incredible increase from 2014 to 2018, 6.8 million to 11.6 million people voting. Think of that change in just 4 years. And so we know one of the things that is a motivating factor, probably the one, is to reverse the policies of this administration. But I thought maybe Astrid and Maria Teresa could talk about the issues that matter the most. I have a little clue about that, being around the country, but I want to hear from you two on what you think is most motivating, especially young Latinos to vote, and what issues they'd like us to be focusing on.
Thank you. And obviously the children are at the border are, you know, I could have been that child. I came here when I was 4. So many of us in this room, so many of us could have been that. But you think about also the children being separated from their parents in the interior enforcement. Those American children, those American citizens who are being put into foster care while they're waiting for their parents, those children are growing up. Those children are becoming those voters that Maria Teresa talks about. Those children now, I started organizing in 2009. The kids that I started organizing with, they're voting now. The little children whose parents had just been removed, or whose dad had just been deported, or whose mom was trying to figure out how to do it, those kids, they're voters. Those kids, they're not like us dreamers who can't vote. They're voting, and they want to be listened to because they know what it feels like to live without their mom. They know what it feels like to have to drop out of high school because they have to help out in the family and take care of them. And those are the people that everybody needs to be talking to, and talking to them and asking them what are the issues that matter to them, because they're all the same. It's their jobs, it's their family, it's what each of us cares about, and all of you know what all of you care about. That's all we do. The only difference is that for those who are just now turning to vote, people think that all they care about is you know, whatever random trend is happening. No, they care a lot more than that. These kids are educated, they know what's happening, and also not to leave out, one of the groups that we work with the most is elderly people. People who never became American citizens because they were like, me voy a morir mexicano, right? They're gonna die Mexican, because that was the belief. Those people are becoming citizens too. And right now, the current backlogs are keeping them, the USCIS backlogs are keeping them from becoming those citizens.
So, first of all, I think that one of the challenges is that the narrative is that Latinos don't vote. And I want to stress is that no, when we register, 79% of us come out to vote. It's imperative that we close the voter registration gap. It's very real. But what motivates us right now is the protection of our families. After the El Paso shooting, Univision conducted a poll among the Latino community. 85% of us are fearful of when the next one will happen. So it's not if, but when. And it is through the communication of our vote that we give individuals courage to do the right thing. The fact that in Texas they're talking about gun reform is because they fear our vote. In 2018, Voto Latino registered 202,339, and I count every single one because every vote matters. Our goal this year is to register 500,000, but the only way we do that is through partnership. And so we created an app called Voter Pal that allows people to register their friends and family. It takes agency because it says, you know what, I'm registered, who else can I register? Planned Parenthood is using it, Steve Mann's stores are gonna be using it, but we need to use it. It's super easy to use. The Apple Store called it one of the top five political apps because it's that simple. So download Voter Pal, and that's my public service announcement. But when you ask what drives, because we need all of us at the table, what drives the Latino community, and this is research recently done by the Latino Victory, is that they found in Texas what was moving young Latinos was gun reform, immigration, healthcare, and the environment. In Texas, the red state of Texas, that is the bellwether for the rest of the community. And when folks are trying to figure out what aligns the Latino community with with mainstream America. It runs around healthcare. In 2016, Voto Latino participated in a survey with Emily's List, specifically in Nevada, because they were trying to figure out how do you get Latina young voters to vote. And I said, ask a healthcare question. And they're like, why? And sure enough, young Latinas that were 23 years old cared as much about healthcare as a 54-year-old white woman. Why? Because in many ways, they were the sandwich generation. If their parents who are doing backbreaking work get hurt, all of a sudden that 23-year-old has to decide, does she drop off out of school or not to go support their parents? And the reason we've been focusing Voto Latino from our inception on young Latinos is that we know that they are decision makers in their families long before they're 18 years old. They've been navigating America for 18, and since before they were 18, whether it was in the doctor's office, whether it was in the teacher-parent conferences. I did poor translations when it came to my parent-teacher conferences, to be honest. But so there's a different type of agency and urgency and understanding of what parents are facing. They have grown up fast. And so now what we have to give them is the power of the information so they can mobilize.
So one of the factors that we're seeing is a tremendous effort by the Republican Party to invest in voter suppression and intimidation. And that includes limiting early voting, that includes purging voting rolls, that includes creating confusion over polling places, a whole series of tricks. We've even seen things like in Iowa, they passed a law that said the only state ID you can use that is acceptable for ID for voting is one with an expiration date. And why that little factor? Well, it was because the student IDs did not have an expiration date, therefore they were trying to keep young people from voting. And so in this business of advocating for the vote, and in the face of voter intimidation and suppression, how can we take on that piece of the puzzle? So we not only get people registered, but we take on these variety of strategies to keep people from voting after they're registered.
I can speak just briefly what we do, and then for other folks. In 2014, we were part of a study. It was right after the gutting of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court, and we did a fantastic job telling people how hard voter ID laws were going to make them to vote, and we actually saw that as a suppression. We were helping shape that narrative. So we took a different tactic with the Lawyers Committee and started making it very matter of fact. You are now in Texas, and this is what you're going to need. You are now in Wisconsin, this is what you're going to need. And that matter of fact language allowed people to feel empowered with the information they knew. Now, Leo does a fantastic job talking about the resources people need at the polls. We partner with Naleo and the Lawyers Committee. But then on the back end, we, Voto Latino, signed on to a whole bunch of amicus briefs that were led by different, whether it was the Advancement Project, the Lawyers Committee, and a few others, where we were basically challenging these laws. We challenged them in North Carolina, in Arizona, and in Texas. And we were able to use testimonials from people who were actually prevented from casting a ballot. So we see it as a two-way game, right? One that's the external communications, empowering the community with the information they need, and then fighting in the courtrooms, as Maldif does so well every single day.
Little along the same lines, the census. We had something, you had just brought it up with regard to the DACA case coming up, but a victory of sorts, where finally the courts, after some lower courts had gotten involved, in fact struck down the administration's attempt to add the citizenship question, in part because they literally had no valid reason to do it except to discriminate against the Hispanic community and other immigrant communities. And that was actually just an amazing thing to watch. There's so much news every day, you can't track it, but it's worth looking back through that about how that happened and that justice was finally delivered because the facts came out, including the state of someone that showed what the real intention was after he died of when someone came forward with those documents. So do you want to talk about that, Thomas, and maybe looking forward, what the biggest challenges are now with this administration to make sure that everyone is counted for the census?
Absolutely. I think we have to start with that improbable victory in the Supreme Court. It was extraordinary. Nobody predicted it after the oral argument. But ultimately, a majority of Supreme Court justices decided that the reason given for adding the citizenship question was a lie. Now, I want to focus on that because we have a majority of the Supreme Court that has said our Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, lied to Congress and the public in putting that citizenship question on the census. And I just want to pause and think about Lion Wilbur Ross, because that's what I will call him publicly, since I'm now supported by a majority of the Supreme Court in characterizing him that way. Lion Wilbur Ross, still in the Cabinet of the United States, not a single Latino or Latina in the Cabinet of the United States. So 0 Latinos, 1 perjurer, as decided by a majority of the Supreme Court. Pause for a moment. It's not over. It's not over, because Lion Wilbur was directed by Donald Trump to use administrative records to try to get citizenship data across the country. So you've seen the headlines. They're asking departments of motor vehicles for citizenship data. We know in this room and beyond, it's been decided by courts as recently as this year in Texas that DMV records on citizenship are completely inaccurate. Because someone gets their driver's license before they're a citizen, then they naturalize, there's no reason to go back and tell the DMV, hey, I'm now a citizen. The most unreliable records available, and that's what they're using. We've got to stop that. So we've got a court case going to stop that. But I want to get behind what's going on first. First thing that happens after any census is reapportionment of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives, dividing among the states. So the winners get more, those who've lost population or not grown as much lose representation. Right now today, in Birmingham, Alabama, there is a court case going on where the state of Alabama, joined by Mo Brooks, a congressman from Alabama, then the state of Alabama is arguing that before the Census Bureau takes the census data and reapportions those House seats, it should be required to subtract an estimate of the population of undocumented immigrants in every state. Think of that. This is 2019. We have not just a state, but a Congress member from that state arguing seriously to a federal court that certain people, namely undocumented immigrants, don't count at all. You'd have to go back over 150 years. It was the 14th Amendment after the Civil War that got the 3/5 rule, the rule that was in our initial Constitution saying that African American slaves only counted as 3/5 of a person. It took a civil war in the 14th Amendment to get rid of the 3/5 clause. In 2019, we have Alabama arguing for a 0/5 argument with respect to our people, undocumented immigrants. Now, the whole reason that Lion Wilbur has been directed to get citizenship data is to permit states then, in drawing their lines, to consider using voter population rather than total population to equalize our districts. Again, that's targeted at us. As Senator Klobuchar mentioned, we know this from the hard drive of a now deceased political consultant. That's what this is about. Reducing Latino political power and increasing, by contrast, white Republican political power. So that's what's going on with the citizenship data. That's what's going on with this reapportionment case in Alabama. But at the same time, we know what we have to do. We are a resilient community, as we've all heard and know from personal experience. Our reaction has to be to make sure every person is counted. No citizenship question, less danger, no danger because of strong laws protecting confidentiality. Everyone has to be counted. We count by household. We've got to make sure that every person in every household is included. We learned that in 2010, a major portion of the undercount, particularly for the Latino community, was that children 0 to 4 were left out of household census responses. Somehow, the smallest child was left out. Can't happen again. To counter their attempt to reduce our political power, we have to do what we have done in every census and in every election. Come out in even bigger numbers than before. With census, that means making sure that every one of us counts. This is the #1 task for all of us in the beginning of 2020. Then we have the bigger task in November of 2020. We all know what that is. But first, we've got to be counted because it counts for 10 years.
Can I just stress this piece, because when Tom highlights the fact that the majority of children that were not counted were 4 years old or younger, That means that when they go to kindergarten, there will not be a desk for them. For 10 years, that child will basically be under-resourced. 35% of those children that he was talking about, 4 million, were Latino children. So this is a two-pronged approach to disenfranchise us and to keep us basically restricted, making sure that we don't have the education that our community needs. So let's be clear. We need to be counted because we need that kindergartner to have a desk all the way through school and to make sure that they are fully resourced to ensure that they too have the power of their vote eventually.
And keep in mind, the damage is done. Our communities are terrified. No matter what happens in the Supreme Court, the same with DACA. People are terrified. We are supposed to trust somebody, a government that we don't trust. So that's why it's our responsibility. I'm terrified, but I'm going to be sending in our census. Because no matter what, that fear already exists. It's our responsibility to tell people to do it. The same with DACA. Our parents are questioning, mandamos el DACA, should we send in our DACA? Because we are giving our information to USCIS, who is currently led by somebody who could care less about us.
Jose?
Yeah.
These issues are happening, and it's our responsibility for all of us to share that information for our communities.
Well, I would add to what my colleague said. We have amazing community-based organizations represented in this room. I see a lot of great friends that are doing God's work with very limited resources. We know the challenge in front of us. We know what we have to do. This is about, again, making sure that our community is heard, is counted. We are ready to do that. Of course, the issue that we always confront is issues of resources, right? And having the resources to do the work. But we know we have, we don't have another option. We have to be there because the forces are aligned to prevent our community from being heard. And so at a very local level, a family level, at apartment levels, housing levels, we know we need to sort of knock on those doors. We need to get our community educated, and we need to get our community counted. In the same way that we're going to get our community out to vote, it's the same strategy with the census, same strategy with voting.
Thank you, Jose. I mean, we are engaged in a battle between the powerful and the people. And the powerful do not want the people to vote. And the Supreme Court has been at the heart of this. They have gutted the Voting Rights Act, as mentioned. They took a case and a few weeks ago ruled on gerrymandering, that they put no restrictions on extreme partisan gerrymandering, which is a huge abuse of equal representation. And they had their 5-4 decision on Citizens United, which was about essentially supercharging the ability of the richest Americans to put hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns. And the whole idea of the Constitution, which was, as Jefferson described, distributed power so that you would have laws that reflect the will of the people, the Supreme Court threw that out and said concentrated power is fine. It's fine for some people to have the equivalent of a stadium sound system that drowns out the voice of millions of ordinary people. So this is the battle we're in. It doesn't end with an election, because after an election there's legislation. And I wanted to point out that the House passed a bill that was H.R. 1. They made it number 1. It took on gerrymandering, voter suppression, dark money, and ethics. And in the Senate, there are 47 sponsors, 47 Democrats and independents sponsoring it, and we can't get one person across the aisle to sponsor it because they've been instructed not to, because it's a source of power to the Republican Party. We need to pass this act, the For the People Act, in the U.S. Senate in January 2021. Another place we see power that's not offered is that we have many U.S. citizens who do not have a person representing them with voting power in the House or in the Senate. That's certainly true for the citizens of D.C. It's also true for the citizens, U.S. citizens, which I would remind our president, yes, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. They do not have representation. I went down to Puerto Rico 8 months after the hurricane to see how the repairs had gone, And I was just appalled because so little had been done. So many people still didn't have power. So many clinics and hospitals still were in disrepair. Is it time for Puerto Rico to be a state and to have representation in the House and Senate so as U.S. citizens, they have a voice?
We're not going to touch that issue, Senator. Here. I would say I am very grateful that you're bringing up the issue of Puerto Rico. Obviously, I think that's critically important, and the people of Puerto Rico will decide their fate as they should. But on this note, I should say, you know, the real question is why the recovery in Puerto Rico has stalled. Why hasn't it started in earnest 2 years after the fact? And the answer to that is, and so many answers end up the same way, is that this administration has shown repeatedly its contempt for the people of Puerto Rico, has repeatedly shown a lack of respect, compassion, and commitment to the people. We can start from the throwing of paper towels to, yes, no, that it was funny, but it's sad at the same time, right? To also, again, demonizing a local mayor for asking for federal assistance, to minimizing the death toll, which ended up over 3,000 people in the island, to fighting against this Congress, congressional leaders here on the Democratic side, for money that Puerto Rico desperately needed. He fought tooth and nail, this administration, to deny them basic resources that they needed. In fact, 2 years after the storm, just a couple of months ago, they took away food assistance for the people of Puerto Rico after the hurricane that they desperately needed. And worst of all is that the little monies, right, that was appropriated for Puerto Rico, not little, right, but in the grand scheme, not enough, $18 billion that was appropriated by this Congress. This administration has done everything possible to deny that money from getting to Puerto Rico. It has, in fact, usurped the power of Congress and refused to give, again, dollars, just basic dollars to Puerto Rico. And I'll give you one example. HUD allocated $18 billion for the people of Puerto Rico to fix the housing there, the housing infrastructure. Only $1.5 billion of that money has actually reached Puerto Rico. So there's no surprise that there's still in Puerto Rico today over 30,000 homes with FEMA blue tarps, waiting for their roofs to be fixed, waiting for their homes to be fixed, waiting for a return to normality in many ways. And this is what this administration continues to do. Just last week, Mick Mulvaney, right, and Secretary Carson went before this Congress to admit, yes, we've intentionally been delaying the giving of this money that was appropriated to Puerto Rico because we don't want the money to go. Instead, we want part of this money to go to the building of our wall. In fact, they've taken $600 million of that money to build this hateful and unnecessary wall. And so I think it's important that we talk about the power of Congress and Congress not allowing this president to usurp its power. So the Congress is investigating and needs to continue to investigate. And where there are crimes that have been committed, it needs to act on that. But most importantly, we need to make sure that every penny that was allocated gets to the people of Puerto Rico.
Amen. Jose, I know you didn't want to touch statehood, but the reason I mentioned it is I believe that if there was a person in the Senate representing Puerto Rico, that person would have been able to, or in the House, would have been able to say this is unacceptable and spoken peer-to-peer with colleagues. And by the way, folks in Puerto Rico, because of the way Electoral College is structured, don't have a vote on the presidency. And so I think it's time that every American citizen should have a voice in electing the President of the United States.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, Senator. So you can get 100 Puerto Ricans in a room and you will not find consensus
Sounds like a great joke.
on that issue, right? But I would say certainly, you know, there are pros and cons on either side. What I would say clearly is we have a moral responsibility as Americans, and these are our fellow Americans, to fight on behalf of Puerto Rico. You also have over 8 million Puerto Ricans living here in the diaspora that will not forget Puerto Rico, that will never forgive this administration for what it has failed to do on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico and the Latino community, which is 60 million strong. And again, all Americans should be horrified about, the lack of or the contempt that this administration has shown to the people of Puerto Rico, American citizens.
Just one last question, and then we're going to change over to our fireside chat. I think we need a fire in here. It's a little cold with Jose Andres. But I just wanted to ask the question that Eva kind of raised, actually, in our last discussion, where she talked about the economic argument for immigration reform. And as I look at us going into this election at all levels, as well as after that, what is the best argument? And maybe Maria Teresa, you have done, or Jose, you've seen some numbers on this, to get people with us. We know where the Hispanic community is. That is very clear and strong and important to turn out the vote. But how are we going to bring people with us? Because they have been with us on immigration reform in the past. When we passed the bills, we had George Bush wanted to get it done. We had, obviously, President Obama did. We had Republicans in Congress, in the Senate especially, that were willing to stand up for it. And so just what do you think our strongest arguments are to move this ahead? Because that is, I am obsessed with the fact that we have had the votes. It's always been one thing. The House didn't do it, or now we have a president that won't do it. And this is our time to do it, and I don't think we should wait. I think we should do it in the first year of a new president. And so I just wondered your thoughts about that.
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's, when we're talking about the issues of DACA specifically, the DACA students have been the most vetted immigrants in our country. And they're also the ones that have contributed highly. They have one of the highest employment rates in our country. When Astrid and Tom mentioned earlier that it affects thousands of teachers, it affects close to 33,000 teachers. That's roughly about 280,000 students if you were to pull those teachers from the school. Imagine what happens to that economy and to those folks. But when you look at the totality of Latinos, including the undocumented, the Latino community is the 11th largest economy in the world. The U.S. American Latino is. We're the fastest growing economy by GDP among the 4 top most developed countries in the world. We control $1.7 trillion. If folks decided to pull our folks outside, we saw what happened in Alabama when Alabama decided that it was a good idea to pass legislation and allow immigrants, to basically pull farm workers away from pulling their food, and decided they were going to bring in prison labor to do it. One, they weren't able to, and that industry lost billions of dollars in one summer. But that means that we're talking about an industry of Latinos who we are the fastest purveyors right now of small businesses, specifically among women. But the reason is because when you take a step back, the majority of white Americans are 54 years old. The majority of Latinos are 19 years old. The average age of a white American is 47 years old. The average age of a Latino is 28 years old. We are at the height of an economic power engine. We need to be healthy. We need to have access to strong education, but it's not just because of us, but we are the future of the country, and our future is born. And we have to make sure that we are creating places where people can thrive based on their abilities and not based on their zip code or the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I would.
Senator, so I would add to that just to say that there is no sector in the American economy that is not touched by immigrant hands, not one sector. And in fact, many of them are being driven by immigrants. American exceptionalism, the greatness of this country is because we have taken people from all over the world and we have allowed them to work hard, to sacrifice, and build their families and build their communities. That is American prosperity. That is the basis of American prosperity. We have lost our way when it comes to that. So I'm really grateful to you, Senator Klobuchar, for focusing on the economic reasons why we need immigration in this country. There are also moral and social and a million other reasons why we need to make sure that we get back on the rails when it comes to immigration. I mean, clearly, I think we all understand the importance of that. It is a very personal issue for Latinos. In many ways, it's a defining issue. I can tell you as a son of immigrants, that is something that, again, identifies us, that we identify with in a deep way. But I think it's all Americans, and I think the majority of Americans understand the value. There is no American city in this country that has not been built by immigrant hands. And I would add today that there is no rural part in America that is not being sustained by immigrants today, right?
Exactly. In
so
fact,
we need to remember that.
I'm going to let Senator Merkley make closing comment here, but one of the arguments I used that seemed to work very well when they were trying to deport all our Liberians out of Minnesota, the TPS people, was that we would have no one in our nursing homes working. What would happen to our hospital workers in a low unemployment state? So I think that the economic argument is the aspirational argument that we all feel in this room, but it's also really being pointed about what would happen if they really had their way and deported all these people, well, 11 million, 12 million people, or whatever they're talking about. So I think that argument, and I haven't seen polls on this or know what it works, but I think people think about that when they realize where their grandma is and who's helping them and those kinds of things. It may not be our argument in the room, but I just keep thinking about how we make this economic argument in a way that's going to hit home for people.
So, Senator, I just want to, the systemic side of that argument is we wouldn't have Social Security as long as we've had it and with enough time to address the issue if immigrants weren't in the economy, because unfortunately our native-born workforce is older and they need that Social Security. So that's the systemic side of it. But to take it to the personal, as you have with who's in the nursing home, that's the bottom line issue that Eva Longoria was talking about. We've got to make sure that everyone understands and experiences what it is to have Latinos and immigrants in their lives. Look at the story of November 2018. Where were we successful? Where people knew Latinos because the Latino population was significant. Arizona, Nevada. Where were we not successful in November 2018? Where the population of Latinos was well below 10%. There wasn't the personal experience, so who gets to fill the vacuum? The person coming down the escalator and telling us that all Mexican immigrants are rapists and murderers. When we have that vacuum, it starts in media, but it goes beyond.
So you're telling everyone they have to move?
I'm telling them we've got to move and get our stories out there everywhere in this country. You don't have to move permanently, but move so that they know the story, fill the vacuum, and call on others to do so.
It was a metaphor. Ending Jeff Merkley.
I want to thank you all as community leaders for coming from all across America. Is this worth doing again? Are you ready to come again next year? Great. And one of the largest delegations here is from my state of Oregon. I'd like them to stand for just a moment and say thank you to the most fabulous Hispanic community leaders in the country. Thank you all very much. The more that we talk about how the system is rigged and how we can respond to restore power to the people and power to groups that have been suppressed, then we will change America and we will change it for the better. Thank you so much.
Thank you to these great panelists.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. So I was in Puerto Rico. I know the board's been very weird in the past. And really, it divides the diaspora, which is why we usually just stay out of it.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, it does.
When I came back, I was like, this would never happen if they had voting representation. I was so appalled.
There is an argument definitely on that side. And I can tell you, like, the hubs of independence are still in New York and Chicago. Now you get, like, in Florida, like, the Puerto Ricans there are state voters, right? So it ends up dividing the community. So we stay away.
All right, everyone, you had a great panel. Let's hear it for the panel one more time. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
And now we have our next special guest, who I know other than a bathroom break you don't want to miss. No one can deny that our next fireside chat guest is a man of immense talent, creativity, and passion. As the owner of 18 restaurants and the recipient of 2 Michelin stars, Chef Jose Andres has captivated diners with his culinary creations. Running restaurants is demanding as it is, but Jose did not stop there. Instead, he paired his passion for food with his commitment to humanitarian causes, using his craft to make a difference in communities struck by natural disaster. For this, I truly admire Chef Jose Andres. As the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I look at how we respond to disasters in the world in our own interest and being a good neighbor in the world. And what he does, he often does faster, more successfully, and less costly. So there's something for us to learn from him as a government. Jose was born in Spain and emigrated to the United States at the age of 21. By 24, he was leading the kitchen here at Jaleo in Washington. Since then, he's founded countless innovative restaurants across the country, all of which serve novel, delicious, and culturally conscious food. He's hosted a cooking show, won abundant awards, and even taught molecular gastronomy at Harvard. And through his notable career, however, Jose has remained a man of unflinching principle. Again and again, Jose Andres has proven himself a man of action. In response to the 2010 Haiti earthquakes, Jose founded World Central Kitchen, an NGO committed to providing healthy food to communities devastated by disaster. Since its founding, World Central Kitchen has served meals across the globe in the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Zambia, Peru, Cuba, Uganda, and Cambodia, and most recently, when no one else showed up in the Bahamas, there was Chef Jose Andres helping the people of Bahamas. And earlier this year, when the president shut down the government in an effort to extract money from Congress for his ridiculous border wall, World Central Kitchen even opened up a shop on Pennsylvania Avenue to feed struggling federal furloughed workers. Most notably, Andres and World Central Kitchen mobilized for Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria. While the administration neglected the cries of millions of Americans left disconnected and in the dark, Jose and his team built a grassroots network of more than 20,000 volunteers to serve more than 3.5 million meals in the months after the storm. He's been recognized for his heroic action with countless honors, including the James Beard Foundation Award for Humanitarian of the Year, a Nobel Peace Prize nomination. I was proud to lead efforts here in the Senate to secure funding to rebuild Puerto Rico, to build stronger and more resilient than ever before. But to this day, the president and his administration continue to hold hostage crucial funds for Puerto Rico. Fortunately, Jose has never wavered in his commitment to supporting the communities he's helped to feed. In fact, just this year, World Central Kitchen committed $4 million to its Plow to Plate initiative, aimed at increasing Puerto Rico's food security and sustainability by supporting local farmers and food businesses. You know, to me, Jose Andres embodies the best of who we are as Latinos. He is a testament to the unlimited potential of Latino immigrants to succeed, and a reminder that in America, when times get tough, we don't leave each other behind. We stick together, and we don't give up until the job is done. And that's why it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Chef Jose Andres.
Thank you very much. Wow. Hi. How are you guys? Hola, hola. I mean, he should be my marketing officer. Hi, guys. All right.
Well, thank you so much. I would say you've got a better reception than any senator. And We are also so honored to have Senator Kaine here, who's been such a leader. And I think he can start out. Yes. Tim, you want to start?
Yeah, no, this is a real treat. And we claim Jose because being from Virginia here in the DMV, he is not only our role model, he's our neighbor. And he's done such good things. And I, for many years, 5 years, was the chair of the U.S.-Spain Council and is one of the most prominent Spaniards in the United States. Jose was so helpful in that. So this is a great opportunity to ask Jose questions about many, many issues. And I'm going to start with one that is really important to, I think, all of us that has a Virginia tie, and that's TPS recipients and dreamers. In Virginia, we have about 22,000 TPS recipients, and we have about 13,000 dreamers. And if you didn't see the shirt, show the shirt, right? The whole shirt, right? Right?
We're dreamers. Yeah.
I think the dreamers have done an absolutely magnificent job of putting their story kind of at the front space of the American mind. People now understand the dreamer issue. TPS was a harder issue, and not enough people understood the strong, importance of our TPS community in the same way as dreamers. But I actually think, because of some wonderful organizations, in the last maybe 6 months, the TPS story has been better and better understood. But both of these communities are living in huge fear. And Jose, I wanted to ask you the question this way. As somebody with restaurants, as somebody who runs businesses, you've got a lot of dreamers and TPS folks who work with you. So I wonder, we could talk about the big issue, but maybe just tell us some stories about dreamers or TPS folks that you've worked with so that we can do the best job. If we tell the story well, I think we'll get the policy right. So that's where I'll start.
Well, I can give you so many stories of so many individuals that it boils down to one simple thing, right? I'm a cook. Now people call me a business guy, but I'm still a cook because I don't know how the business are run. I have great people that run the business for me. And I am like the glue that keeps everything together. And without a doubt, I wouldn't be where I am sitting here today if it wasn't for the amazing help that hundreds, if not thousands, of immigrants, they've been providing my businesses. Today we are in the lowest unemployment we've seen in decades. And we have a president that is a business president. And to this day, it's very amazing that right now, an immigrant like me, I applied to my company E-Verify for many years, but I did it only for one simple reason. If I wanted to be outspoken about immigration and immigration reform and speak on behalf of the many people that are voiceless, I always believe that, yes, let me show that E-Verify maybe is the way, on top of passing immigration reform that will bring over 11 million people out of the shadows. And news boils down to this simplicity. We've been filming Rodolfo Guzman, he's Bolivian. When I came into Washington, D.C., he's a man that was in the army of Bolivia, and for whatever reason, he ended in Washington, D.C. I found him building the bar behind Jaleo a month before we opened. 26, 27 years later, Rodolfo Guzman became the head chef, helped me open 5 Jaleos around America, has been in charge of hundreds of new jobs, training immigrants like him and Americans, and he owns like 2-3 homes now. He's been, when you see the work that a man like Rodolfo put into making our communities better, one plate of food at a time, the hard work and hardships that dreamers, that immigrants, undocumented immigrants, bring to the table is just unbelievable. I was 3 months ago filming a documentary here, and I was at the cafeteria at the Senate here because the government shut down. A guy like me can lease the usage of the restaurant where senators and congressmen eat. My idea was to invite dreamers to eat there. We're doing a documentary where we're going to be telling America what immigration reform has to happen. Why is the right, decent thing to do? And we went into the kitchen and we began filming every single box of vegetables. And we followed those vegetables all the way to the farms, the fish all the way to the fishing boats, the chickens all the way to the chicken factories. And what we found that from Senate, from the Hill, all the way to the place they began, everybody involved in the process, from the workers on the field to the distribution, truck drivers to the, was undocumented in every path. Our senators and our congressmen today are eating because more than 11 million undocumented are able to bring the food. And you know one thing I learned, that America, without a doubt to me, is the most wonderful democracy. Imperfect, and we need to keep getting it better, but the most beautiful democracy in the history of mankind. But democracy dies without empathy. We need to start bringing empathy to the conversation of immigration reform.
Okay, now speaking of that, empathy, I got to see firsthand the empathy, your empathy, and your workers, and the inspiration, not only how you serve meals after natural disasters in the Bahamas and, of course, in Puerto Rico, in Haiti, but I got to see firsthand what you did when we had all those workers furloughed in Washington, D.C., our government workers. And it was this incredible scene. A number of us volunteered, and I was particularly bad at it, I would say.
No, you did great.
Yeah, okay.
You did great.
That's why I did this job instead of your job. But it was just something. Could you talk a little bit about your motivation? Because I think my own view, and Tim may remember this, we were doing a lot of things to end that shutdown and trying to do it for the workers, and the president didn't seem to care. And as you remember, the deal he ended up taking was almost worse than what he could have done before. It was an unbelievable story. But you, by having those lines of workers waiting to get food because they weren't getting paid, I thought that was an incredible
Outdoors
moment.
in January. It was really cold.
Yeah, and they were
It was
still
really
standing
cold.
in line, and it just showed just the horrific crisis that had been caused by this. And the fact that you thought about this, to do this, right in the middle of Washington, D.C., just like you would have done in Haiti, I think made it a big difference in us being able to get this done. So could you talk about that and how you came up with that idea?
We were in Puerto Rico with my very best friend and executive director of the NGO I founded many years ago, Nate Mook. He's with us here today. And I've been doing this for a few times. The last 3 shutdowns, I put my restaurants between 2 and 5. Any federal employee, no questions asked, you'll get a plate of food. I thought it was the right thing to do and the decent thing to do. When this one was going low, and I did it because I saw mainly was a lot of federal employees who were women and who were single mothers, and they were in pain. And we need to support our women more because the women, to me, are really the DNA of our society. And they carry so much more weight than any man. They really do. It's unbelievable. And that's unfair. So I did it because of that reason. When I saw that this was going longer, Nate and I, from Puerto Rico, we announced a national food emergency. We opened the kitchen next to many of my friends that already the restaurants were doing. But we opened one kitchen, World Central Kitchen. I think at times we were reaching 15, 20,000 people going through the line a day in that one kitchen. The photo of those lines show up on the New York Times front page. And they very much were saying, first time since the Great Depression that we see hunger lines in America.
And it was workers from FBI, EPA,
Everybody.
all these places. It was unbelievable.
But the story didn't end there. That kitchen was one kitchen. I want everybody to know that we had a big map in the headquarters at the Navy Memorial. I'm a Navy boy. I was in the Spanish Navy. For me, coming to Washington and open my restaurant next to the Navy Memorial was like a blessing. We opened there that kitchen. We did a supermarket next to it, so anybody could negotiate their delay payment for telephone, for whatever. We put like a supermarket of things. You can bring a bag of food to your home. But we didn't end there. With help from many people, many of you show up. I was very proud that actually Congressman Bill Hurt came, was there, and Ivanka Trump came. I really wanted to make it bipartisan because I do believe it's the way forward, like I know many of you believe. And at the end, we opened 575 restaurants in 35 states, providing for over 2 weeks 1 free meal to every single federal employee that was in need of one. That's what I was very proud of. 535. And the reason we created World Central Kitchen was simple. Many, many stories. But the one very important to me, besides my mom and my dad were nurses, and I always saw they went beyond their duty. My first apartment was above Jaleo on 7th and E, across the street from a tiny building that nobody seems to recognize or ever go in, which says the Missing Soldiers Office. Another woman that during the Civil War, single-handed, put together a system to take care of the wounded during the Civil War. That woman was Clara Barton.
Right.
And she was the one that lent the possibility of creating the American Red Cross. She inspired me in the way my father and mother inspired me. If a nurse was able to create such an amazing logistic system of taking care of the wounded, why cooks like me, we cannot try to achieve the same system to feed people when there are emergencies? That's the reason of the existence of World Central Kitchen today.
I'm actually going to have to go to the floor to, fight to have election security. Might be a good idea. But before I do and turn it over to my friend Tim Kaine here and thank all of you, one last question from me, Jose, and that is foreign aid. We talked about the case you made by opening the kitchens here in the U.S., and we need to make the case often to our colleagues about how to make the argument that, as General Mattis once said, what we don't give in foreign aid, he has to pay for in bullets. And that we have a strong security and moral argument. I don't know why I'm losing my voice. I may be giving too many speeches. We have a strong security and moral argument to make for foreign aid. And what argument do you think works best as someone that tries to work with both sides for the betterment of this world?
Well, thank you for asking me, because I know you know these answers even better than me, but I can, in the most humble way I can share with you my experiences on the ground. After the volcano exploded in Guatemala, next to Antigua and Escuintla, World Central Kitchen was there within 24 hours. We created the feeding system for the entire community around. We were feeding, 30,000 meals a day? 30,000 meals a day in every single shelter, official or not. We are an NGO that we are very proud that we were created in Washington, D.C., in America. We were there making sure that people will have a future to look upon. Feeding them from the very beginning was a way to tell them things are going to get better tomorrow. Don't leave your communities, because if they don't have anything to hope for, they will leave. Now let's bring it to really policy, USAID, which is an arm of the government. Should we be investing more money in USAID, or even supporting NGOs like ours, versus forever and ever increase our military? And I've been in the military myself, and I have the highest respect, and I want to have the best military we have. But every dollar, as General Mattis said, we spend it in providing aid and relief, especially to neighbor countries, is less shots that our soldiers will have to fire. The conversation today is about walls, to simplify it, because America is talking about walls. It's the walls of exclusion versus the walls of inclusion. Walls of exclusion are ones that you separate. My daughters are not going to be any safer by putting them behind a wall. They are I'm only just keeping them blind of the real wall out there. And when I'm not here, that wall will fall and my daughters will not be in a good place. We believe in walls of inclusion. What walls we need to build through USAID and organizations as World Central Kitchen? If we go to Guatemala, if we go to Haiti, if we go to Bahamas, if we go to Mexico, if we build walls of investing in the communities to do better, community centers, schools, colleges, hospitals, business schools for local economies to be thriving on their own, all of a sudden, those walls we're building, one building at a time, are the ones of inclusion, are a true investment for a better tomorrow. That's the way to keep America safe. That's why investing in USAID is the best investment for national security that the United States of America can ever do. If others do well, that's the new American dream. Not only to look after ourselves, after our own family and the people we know, but the new American dream of the 21st century is to make sure that everybody else around us do as well as we do. That's the only way to keep moving the planet forward.
Good. All right, Amy.
Thank you.
Go.
Thank you.
Go battle for election security. So,
Thank you, everybody.
one of the things. One of the many things I love about Jose is that he's a good storyteller. So the power of stories is really, really important. And what he does is he's talking to us about the work that he's done in Puerto Rico. For those who weren't there after the hurricane, he makes it so vivid as he describes it. And so I want to ask a storytelling question, really, and about a way to change a story. And so this is a question sort of for all of us who are advocates, but it's also for the news folks who are here in terms of the way they report stories.
We love you, press.
We do. No, we
love you.
But
we love you, TP, and journalists of the world. You are my friend.
Friends of the people, we call you.
Not my enemy.
Friends of the people.
But I don't want to make any point.
But here's a frustration. If I'm turning on the evening news, so many times the story about immigration is a story about the border and walls and security and, criminals. This is kind of the story that's like the predominant media narrative now. So here's a story that I like. I'm 61. I know I look dramatically younger, but when I was born, 1 out of every 100 Virginians had been born in another country, and we were bottom quarter economically. We were bottom 15 in terms of family income. Today, remember, 1 out of 100. Today, 1 out of every 8 Virginians was born in another country, and we're top quarter in family income. Only 2 states in my life have gone from bottom to top. One was North Dakota. They discovered oil. Well, we didn't discover oil in Virginia, but what we did was we broke down the barriers that said kids couldn't go to school together if their skin colors were different. Women couldn't go to UVA and some of the other institutions. And we broke down the barrier of trying to push folks away. I wish more of the narrative about immigration was about you can go from bottom of the pack to top of the pack economically if you are embracing of talented people from around the world. How do we change the big narrative, the story that we tell about immigration through great business leaders like you? We have so many dueños y dueñas en la comunidad latina que está creciendo the fortunes of all of their neighborhoods and cities. But how do we get that as the predominant story about immigration rather than just what's going on in the security challenges of the day?
When you go to, obviously America is not, everybody's aware, is divided like it seems it's never been divided before. But it seems that we are divided here and here. When we are not so far away, we are divided more here and here. If you turn down Twitter and you don't read the news and you become a person that gets the information on your own and you go to the communities and you get your own news by smiling to some person you don't know, by establishing a conversation with your busboy or your waiter or your Uber driver or your farmer or a random person in the middle of the street, all of a sudden you see that America is actually not so divided. So I do believe, especially for the 40+ million Latinos that we are not Latinos, We're more than that. We are a huge family that within our own Latino community, we are so diverse. A guy from Colombia has nothing to do with a guy from Chile or from Spain or from Puerto Rico or from, and that diversity is very much the fundamentals that America has been created upon. I'm a chef, I love the explanation of the melting pot. So we need to start being more pragmatic and trying to bring people closer to us. I'm tired sometimes to go to forums like this one, that anything I say, everybody claps like seals in the zoo that you give us a treat. We need to start putting ourselves in more uncomfortable places. And we need to be having a message of pragmatism, of love, of understanding, of I understand you are afraid of me, but I'm actually also afraid of you. What can we do to don't be afraid of each other? We need to start using those stories of immigrants that seems that you are in the middle of North Carolina and all of a sudden ICE removes a member of the community that is being beloved and he's been there for 25 years, and they remove him and they send him back to the country he came from. And all of a sudden that community in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, is in arms saying, why did you took away Jorge? He's one of us. You see, those stories, when they touch the people at the end, it's not them versus us, it's with the people. So yes, we're gonna have to be doing more, not only to engage those that think like us, but we are all have to do more to engage those that don't think like us. That's why these last 2 years, I'm one cook, I'm one man, but every time they invite me to go to anywhere in Middle America that I know is many people that actually don't think so much like me, those are the places I try to do an event, because I use the moment to tell that same message. We the people mean all of us. I mean that you need to understand me and I need to understand you, and that we can find middle ground, and that you should be not afraid of us, because we are not taking your jobs. We are actually providing you jobs. We are not here to take away your dream. We are only trying to become part of yours by you being there. The good thing about immigrants, and I've been an immigrant all my life, is that we come with so much force and willingness and humbleness to belong, that's why it sometimes seems like, wow, look at these immigrants. They are creating jobs here, creating jobs there. But that's not in America. That's everywhere in the world. So we use the immigrants when the economy is growing, and in the moment the economy is going down, we don't want immigrants anymore, and now we want them out. The big thing we need to be careful is we are in the lowest unemployment this country has ever seen. And we have a group of individuals, because I believe it's a group of individuals, that they are trying to keep passing this message that immigrants are everything but nice words. And we have to stop that every time we hear that rhetoric. We cannot let anybody say a lie no more about immigrants. Anytime anybody says something like we know is not true, it's the responsibility of everybody in this room to speak up immediately. Because every time we keep silent, we let the lies keep moving. And we don't have that America that is nice, that America that has empathy, that America that actually they want an America that is prosperous. But when they only hear negative comments about immigrants, about undocumented, about dreamers, if you keep hearing the same message every day, those people, almost like a Star Wars movie with Darth Vader, those people they see us like we are the monster. We are not. So, message, move away from your comfort zone. Move into those communities that maybe see Latinos, Hispanics, immigrants like a different, strange thing, and commit to challenge them in a good, humble, honorable, loving way. And every time you hear a lie, don't shut up. Speak up, engage, and try to convince them that actually they are not right. That's our destiny, and that's what we have to be doing every single day.
All right, that's great. Wow, wow. Let me do one more. So when the staff tells me to wrap up, I take that as, okay, I'll just ask one more question. And you can give a short answer, Jose, but this is one where we need advice in Congress on this question, and that is Puerto Rico. In the aftermath of the hurricane, aid, but is it being delivered the right way? Is it getting to the people in the way that it should? There are big, important policy issues with respect to Puerto Rico. We treat Puerto Rico like a state for some purposes. We treat it completely different than a state for other purposes. There's not much rhyme or reason to that. I have a hard time figuring it out. What advice would you give to Congress about relations with these Americans?
Well, we read that HUD, Housing and Urban Development, was holding funds that they were already approved, and we were not releasing them to Puerto Rico. It's amazing that America became America fighting against a British oppressor and treating America like a colony that was mistreated. And almost 3 centuries later, we are treating Puerto Rico in the same way we become independence from an oppressing country. How can we be doing this 300 years later? We need to be changing that. But we know that there's many things that we are not treating Puerto Rico well. The Jones Act, how it is possible that an American Puerto Rican pays for their food more than any other American in the homeland. Why we keep letting the Jones Act keep Puerto Rico kind of behind and costing everything much more. When we hear the debt, part of that debt has a lot to do with that Jones Act that is being very unfair. But at the end of the day, it's very simple. World Central Kitchen, we committed $4, $5, $6 million over the next 2, 3, 4 years to give grants to farmers. We believe that the reconstruction was helping Puerto Rico to be food self-sustained. We already impacted, I think, over 60 farms all across Puerto Rico, small farmers, many of them women, between 4 and 8, 12 employees. This was a little way for us to go down to the roots of the issues and making sure that we invest in the community, that Puerto Rico doesn't stop importing 90% of the food. But this goes bigger than this. Part of the issues we are facing with Puerto Rico today is because the aid we provided Puerto Rico after Maria through FEMA was slow, was inefficient. We need to be, and I believe that when you don't start in the right way, then to come back is very hard. I believe that sometimes many of the issues is that we don't begin in the right way. FEMA has to change. We need to have the emergency organization that provides relief to Americans in need after emergencies. And then we need the reconstruction that helps places like Puerto Rico. So what we're not doing right is very simple. Puerto Rico is in a limbo. Washington, D.C. is in a limbo. I pay taxes in Washington, but I don't have anybody that represents me in Congress.
Right.
How it is possible? They don't have representation. They don't have a voice, and makes everything much more hard. But Puerto Rico, once and for all, and I know this is a political sensitive issue in Puerto Rico itself, but I would say that Puerto Rico has once and for all to become a state of the United States of America with real rights like every other state and every other real citizen. In the moment we achieve this, everything else is gonna be so much easier. If not, we're gonna be going this way through years and years. Puerto Rico is a great opportunity for America. It's not a problem for America. It's a great opportunity for America to have this amazing piece of America in the heart of the Caribbean. We need to keep investing more in making sure that that happens.
Excellent. Thank you, Jose Andres. Give him a round. Hey.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I wanted to announce one thing because it's only for you to know because I'm very proud that we are there representing America. Thursday, World Central Kitchen will achieve 1.5 million meals in Bahamas. That's the way it should happen, quick and effective. We are still doing 40,000 meals a day. We did 40 medical evacuations. We built a dock. We created the infrastructure of feeding every single person in Bahamas. That's the role of America. We need to keep taking the leadership role to keep making the world a better place. We cannot escape that reality. Thank you, guys.
Good morning, everyone. I am Senator Jackie Rosen from the great state of Nevada. And thank you. And before I say what I was going to say, as I stand here and I listen to Jose speak, and I am inspired because as a chef, just as Americans, we know as human beings that food nurtures. It's more than just nourishment. It's more than just calories. It's our memories, it's our traditions, it's the way we take care of each other. And one dish makes a difference. And look what he's done, millions of them. And we know that food is more than just substance. And so motivated by what he said and what it means. And as we come up next month on our holiday of Thanksgiving, and we think about that food and those memories nourish a lot more than just our bodies, we should be very inspired by what he's doing and what we can all do, maybe one dish at a time. But I'm here because I am lucky enough to be from a state, not just the great state of Nevada, but not just a state that has 2 women senators, but a state that has the first Latina woman senator. And so in our great state of Nevada, diversity is truly one of our greatest strengths. In our state, communities from different backgrounds, cultures, and origins, they work together to build upon each other's successes. And we must ensure that Nevada's Latino community, one of the largest communities in the country, has access to the resources necessary to succeed. We have to address critical issues that impact our communities, issues such as access to quality education, affordable health care, workforce training, comprehensive immigration reform. Just this past weekend, I was able to stop by a DACA renewal fair hosted in our home state by Dream Big Nevada. I think, Astrid, you're here somewhere, maybe. Oh, there you are. There, I witnessed families in need receiving assistance. One by one, the families were able to speak with attorneys, volunteers. The staff came in on their day off. They submitted their DACA renewal applications, and if necessary, they received the financial assistance to help them cover the high cost of each application submission. So Astrid Silva, you know her. She is a fearless and bold dreamer, my friend as well. She's the founder and executive director of Dream Big Nevada. We're so proud of her at home and, of course, across the country. Similarly, in Nevada, the Nevada Immigrant Coalition, spearheaded by our partners, Mi Familia Vota, and our strong culinary union. They're working tirelessly statewide to both inform and educate our most vulnerable communities. One of the leaders of the coalition, Cicia Alvarado, is also joining us here today. So I want to thank them, and oh, there you are. I'm looking around, so thank you. It's hard to see from up here, so many faces. I want to thank both of you. I want to thank all of you for what you're doing and what you're continuing to do and what you dream to do. We're going to dream big along with Astrid, but it is my pleasure, honestly, to introduce a trailblazing woman. She served proudly the state of Nevada as our Attorney General for 8 years, working on so many issues of great importance. Like I said, she's the first female senator to represent Nevada, the first Latina elected to the United States Senate. Catherine is a fierce fighter. She has led so many things in our state. I could stand here all day and applaud her, but I'm going to applaud her for these things: her continuous work, her passion, her dedication for addressing the needs important to the Latino community, for increasing the diversity in our state, for protecting our dreamers and their families, for fighting for comprehensive immigration reform. She inspires me every day. I am proud to call her a friend and a mentor. So I would like to introduce to you the Honorable my senior senator, Catherine Cortez Masto.
Wow, what a morning. Was this incredible? My gosh, I only wish I could have stayed for all of it. Was back there listening to Jose as well, and the powerhouse conversation that we've had has just been tremendous. But before I do anything, I want us to thank Senators Menendez and Klobuchar and their staff for all of the hard work in organizing this event this morning. So let's give them a big thanks. And thanks to all the panelists. We've had a great conversation. And I think we've really shown the tremendous diversity of our Latino community here in America and of the issues that we care about. The theme that I heard from the conversation that we had with Eva to Jose is there is too much hate out there, but it can be conquered with love, right? It can be conquered with love and respect and reaching out to one another, because there are so many things that are at stake right now, and we need to continue to fight for those issues that we care about, from voting rights to census participation, from immigration to representation, from affordable housing to quality education. Latinos in America face challenges at every level, but we've also achieved so much. We play an integral role at nearly every business in our community, every school, every doctor's office and library and county office in America. Hispanic Heritage Month ended just last week, so the contributions of nearly 60 million Americans with ties of birth and family to Latin America have been on all of our minds this month. And, I think about my own family. If you don't know, I am half Mexican and half Italian. My father's side, my father was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, as was my grandmother. My grandfather came from Chihuahua, Mexico, crossed the Rio Grande, served in our military, and became a United States citizen. But I think of their courage coming here to this country, like all of us, our families and our background, and think about where I am today and their courage and strength to make that happen. I stand on their shoulders like we all do. And that is not forgotten on me. Every time I walk into my office or walk into the Capitol or walk on the floor of the Senate where only senators have walked before, and I think about, oh my gosh, my grandfather, my grandmother were alive today, even my father, if he was alive today, what they would be thinking at this point in time. And it is true, we all have stories like that. I am an example of what our families and all immigrants come to this country for, that opportunity for a better life, for themselves, for their kids, to succeed in a country where they know that our freedoms will be protected, right? And that's what's at stake right now. And so for all of us coming together and talking about the strength of our diversity, who we are, our contributions, and that we belong here, is a message we need to continue to take outside of this room. And it's true, I think Eva said, we all have a responsibility. I don't care what station of life you are in, we all have a responsibility to make sure whatever door we walk through, we open it even wider and we help others come through. Because that is our strength. If we want that representation, then we've got to be part of it, and we've got to use our voices, a better life for all of us. And I am so proud to be in this room with all of you and to be able to be a part of this conversation today. It was exciting, and I thank you all for everything that you do and will continue to do on behalf of our communities across this country. So thank you. Now, there is one person who has done so much for our communities in this country and everywhere around the world. He has had a stellar career, and when I first got to the Senate, he was one of the first people that I reached out to and just sat down with him and kind of really tried to pick his brain and learn from him as well. I am pleased to introduce him here again today. You know him well. He is going to close out this summit. But I do want to draw your attention to the way he's been a voice for the Latino community in America. He has been an advocate for Hispanic Americans of every conceivable background and origin story. And he's worked hard to make sure that America supports democracy and freedom for want throughout Latin America, from Venezuela to Cuba to Northern Triangle of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, which are facing down poverty and violence. He is on the forefront when he speaks, not only in the Senate caucus room, but on the floor of the Senate in this country. People listen. And there's a reason why. Because he speaks with passion, and he believes in what he's doing is right for all of us. So I am proud to call him a friend, but so thankful for his voice. So let me invite back to the stage Senator Bob Menendez.
Thank you, Catherine, very much. We're thrilled to have Senator Cortez Masto with us and being such an incredible advocate since she arrived in the Senate. Along with all of my colleagues, we've had an extraordinary number of members of the Senate here today. For those of you who don't get to be here all the time, getting this many senators to come and spend some time is a challenge. So it's really a testament to the community. We get to move these parts of the program along, but bringing it all together is a logistical challenge, and staff. We could not achieve success here, not just for the summit, but for what we do in the Senate without some incredible staff. So I want to recognize Angel Colon from my office, who does such a great job, along with Senator Klobuchar's steering and policy staff. We want to thank all of them. I want to thank our distinguished panelists who had a great and incisive conversation, and two extraordinary special guests, Jose Andres and Eva Longoria. Let's hear it for them one more time. Appreciate it. We've tried to pack a lot in 3 hours, and we hope you find it worthwhile. We'd love to hear from you as to what you thought about the program, how you might think it could become better. We want to continue to refine, improve, and make it valuable to all of you, so we look forward to hearing from you. Let me close out today's summit by offering some thoughts on our Latino community, the challenges we face, and where we go from here. Look, many of us feared that a Trump White House would mean what it would mean for our community. And 3 years later, we've seen some of our worst fears play out in ways we could have never have expected. Never could we imagine, as I saw down in Texas when I went with a bunch of Democratic senators to the border, to see children torn apart from their mothers and thrown into a cage. Not in the America I know and love, but that's what we saw. Or that we would mourn the loss of nearly 3,000 fellow Americans from Puerto Rico, or suffer the most deadly attack on our community in American history in El Paso, Texas. Indeed, when I think about El Paso, my heart aches. The Anchondo family, husband and wife, who were out, I think it's at, I don't know if it was Walmart, one of the stores, buying a barbecue to celebrate their anniversary, and instead died the bullets of someone whose heart was fueled by hatred, and died saving their child as they covered up their child and had the bullets riddle their body so that their child could live. It also breaks for Hispanic Americans and immigrants across our country who are faced with the reality that these innocent, hardworking, and loving people were killed for one reason, and one reason only. They were Latino. They were Latino. And there's no question, I don't take any pleasure or joy in saying this. I don't say this as a partisan. I say it as someone who has fought and worked with 5 different presidents since I came to Congress and served in the House before I came to the Senate. But there's no question that the president's hateful rhetoric, combined with the administration's hateful policies, aim to stoke fear of Latinos for political gain. But when I look around this room and other audiences like this that I have had the pleasure of sharing with, I see nothing to fear. On the contrary, I see nothing but love for family, for community, for love of country. I look around this room and I see the incredible diversity of our community. I think when we are Cuban or Colombian, Puerto Rican or Salvadorian, Dominican and Mexican, and just about everything else in this hemisphere and beyond. The list goes on. Yet these diverse roots don't divide us. They ultimately unite us. They unite us with a community of more than 59 million Latinos across the United States. And of course, that's not even including the 3.5 million of our brothers and sisters from Puerto Rico. Together, we're the largest minority population in the United States. As I said earlier, by 2023, 1 in 3 public school children across our nation will share our heritage. And on college campuses, where nearly 20% of our students are Latino or Latina, a new generation is preparing to lead. No one can deny our incredible influence over American culture. It seems like every time you turn on the radio, there's a Latino or Latina voice to sing along to, whether it's Belcalis Malenis Almanza, who you may know better as Cardi B, or Luis Fonsi singing Despacito. Just a couple of weeks ago, Hollywood gave a standing ovation when Jarrell Jerome became the first Afro-Latino, de sangre dominicana, to win the Emmy for Best Actor. And we have Latinas playing leading roles in many of today's hit shows, from Gina Rodriguez on Jane the Virgin to Shakira Barrera on Netflix Glow. And just last week, David Martinez became the first Puerto Rican in American history to lead a major league team, the Washington Nationals, to the World Series. Nationwide, Latino families command $1.7 trillion in domestic purchasing power. We own over 47 million businesses, creating millions of jobs and contributing over $600 billion to the U.S. economy every year. $600 billion to the U.S. economy every year. Simply put, we are growing, we are striving, and we are succeeding. And there's nothing this president or anyone else can do to stop that. We have every reason to be hopeful for our future, but we cannot take our success for granted. We have to stand up for ourselves and make our voices heard. Throughout our history, Latinos have struggled alongside other minorities for equal rights under the law, equal opportunity in our economy, and equal respect in our society. We made real strides in 2018. We saw a record turnout by Hispanic voters across the nation, and more Latinos are serving in the Congress of the United States today than ever before in the nation's history. It is something to be incredibly proud of, because when we have Latino voices in the caucus rooms, in the meetings, in the hearings, our issues, our views, our perspectives, our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations are represented there. We must keep fighting for affordable health care for every family, which is why we defeated President Trump's efforts to overturn the Affordable Care Act and end Medicaid coverage for 3.2 million Latino and Latinas nationwide who received health care for the first time as a result of Obamacare and Medicaid expansion. We have to keep fighting for equal and fair representation in the media, which is such a powerful medium in our country, which is why I've led the effort in Congress to diversify corporate America in major industries like Hollywood, because we need to see more Latinos and Latinas in front of and behind the camera. We must keep fighting to give every young Latino and Latina an excellent education from preschool to college. If you tell me, this is one of my passions, I know many of my colleagues share it. I grew up poor, the son of refugees, in a tenement in New Jersey, the first in my family to go to college. If you told me growing up poor in a tenement that I could rise to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 320 million people, I would have said at that part of my life it's highly unlikely. But it is the promise of America fulfilled. It is a promise we must fight to keep true for future generations of Latinos, and that is our work here in the Senate each and every day. Which is why we Democrats are working to make child care free for millions of working families, and to protect funds for Hispanic-serving institutions of higher learning. We have to keep fighting to ensure that next year's census, the 2020 census, counts every single one of our families. The census is the vehicle by which every formula of the federal government, education, healthcare, job training, you mention it, has census figures as part of the formula to decide how money goes to our states and our communities. When it comes to congressional representation, how the map of the 435 members of the House is decided comes through census information. When the private sector is looking to make investment decisions, they look at the census information. We need to have, despite the efforts of this administration with their citizenship question and their lack of resources to promote the census, we must be the ultimate census takers and make sure that every Latino and Latina in this country get counted in the 2020 census. Simply put, we have to continue a fight for equal opportunity and justice for all. We can't afford to sit on the sidelines. We cannot afford to be silent, and we cannot afford to be afraid. A generation of Latino immigrants have shaped this country for the better. And to this day, we are the nation's greatest believers in the American dream. So as we close out our 2019 Latino Summit, let us choose hope over hate, esperanza sobre el odio. Let us dream of a future without fear, and let us continue breaking down barriers instead of building new walls, and together we can soar to new heights. Thank you so much for coming to our summit. Get home safely. May God bless the United States of America.